Secret Lives of Mormon Wives Season 3 just dropped, and after binging the entire show, I have one simple question, which is, will MomTok survive this? The show premiered as the #1 show on Hulu, and even major celebrities are talking about how much they love the show. Jennifer Lawrence said that she watches the show to decompress after filming some very heavy scenes. Lana Del Rey is featured in the show in Season 3. Millie Bobby Brown said it's one of her new obsessions, and Khloe Kardashian also said she's obsessed. I watched all 10 episodes over the weekend, and so I'm fully ready for my Season 3 analysis, using my perspective as someone who was raised in a very devout Mormon home, though I am now an ex-Mormon. As you can see, I have pages and pages of notes, so I have a lot to say about this season. This show is kind of crazy because if you look at Google Trends, this is a chart of the interest in the term Mormon on Google for the last 20 years. And so as you can see from this spike here, this is Season 1 of the show. So this show has definitively generated the most interest in Mormon than any other moment in the last 20 years. For reference, this spike is when Mitt Romney was running against Obama for president. This spike is Season 2 of the show, and then as you can see, it's spiking up again for Season 3. Just as a note, there will be spoilers ahead, so just be warned that it's coming. If you're a saint, grab your dirty Dr. Pepper. Just make sure there's at least half a cup of coffee creamer in there. As you may know, dirty soda is Mormon heaven, aka the celestial kingdom, heaven approved. If you're a sinner like me, make sure to brew up a cup of devil's bean juice. We'll meet down here in the celestial kingdom where the sinners go in the Mormon afterlife. And if you're drinking something harder than this, we may just have to send you to outer darkness. Season 3 of Mormon Mommies Gone Wild covered a lot of ground. We had Jesse's relationship issues with Jordan. We had Michaela's relationship issues with Jace. We also saw a couple of the girls were chosen to join Dancing with the Stars. Taylor briefly got back with Dakota. I'm going to cover a lot of these different plot lines, but I'm going to be specifically analyzing the Mormon/ex-Mormon elements of the show. As I watched the show, a lot of very heavy Mormon-related themes were jumping out at me. A lot of aspects of the stories and the women's lives are very culturally Mormon and doctrinally Mormon, and the culture and the doctrine in Utah and in the church are so thoroughly weaved together that part of my analysis is just going to be pulling apart what the difference is and how these two things play together. The reason I bring this up is to simply say that to be culturally Mormon is still to be constrained by the doctrines of the church, and I'm going to present it as if it were a tree. This is our Mormon tree, and deep below the ground, we have the roots, which is the doctrine. So these are the rules, the constraints, the things the prophets have said. This is the theology of the church. But what we see on the show is what's above ground. So that's the culture. Those are the branches of the tree. And even if the women are not fully following the doctrines of the church, they're still culturally caught in its branches. I'm going to get into a lot of examples of this from the show, but what I wanted to start with is there's a scene where Layla goes to get her hair styled for the first time from a black hairstylist. For context, Layla has been getting her hair styled by Jesse. Layla starts to notice some hair loss, and she feels like she needs to go to someone that specializes in caring for and styling black hair, so that's why she ends up seeing this stylist. Let's watch the clip, and then I'll explain the culture and the doctrine behind why this is happening to Layla.
I converted to the church, actually, so the LDS church, when I was 16, but obviously didn't turn out. I still don't have my records removed or anything like that. I haven't made that final step, but there's a lot of things I don't resonate with when it comes to the church, obviously, especially some history parts that are not okay.
There is an old scripture in the Book of Mormon that states that black skin is a curse.
How do you deal with your mental here and depression and things like that? Because I know for myself, those are things that I struggle with here.
So now that you've seen the clip, I'm going to break down the culturally Mormon elements of this storyline and then also the doctrinally Mormon elements. Layla actually speaks to one of the things I was going to bring up, which is the Book of Mormon verse that says that black skin is a curse. I'll put it to the side here if you want to read it. This verse essentially links back to a racist interpretation of the Bible. Joseph Smith taught about the curse of Cain, which is basically that because Cain killed Abel, God put a mark on on him, and racist interpretations of that have meant that the mark was black skin. The Book of Abraham is another Book of Mormon scripture and additionally has these racist elements. This scripture here was the reason why black people were not allowed to have the priesthood or go into the Mormon temple until 1978. Truly, when it comes to doctrinal racism against black people, this is just dipping our toe in here. I have a whole video about it. Brigham Young also taught that interracial marriage should be punished by death. Joseph Smith taught that if black members of the Mormon Church were faithful in this life, even though they had all these restrictions, then in the next life they would be healed by having their skin turn white. And so when I talk about the roots of the tree, these are all the doctrines that are impacting the lives of people who are still in the church, people like the hairstylist who's not a member of the Mormon Church, but just simply living in Utah and expresses that she feels depressed and isolated. The current prophet of the Mormon Church was 46 years old when the priesthood ban got overturned. And so if even the leadership of the church was raised believing these racist ideas, of course it's still going to have an impact on the day-to-day culture of where the church is operating. So now that I've established the roots of the tree, the doctrine, let's investigate how that impacts the culture of Utah and people who live amongst Mormons. There are many ways this manifests in the culture. We have less than 1% of Brigham Young University is black. We have students at the university making content on TikTok about how isolated and alone they feel. Another example of this is just fewer black people are willing to move to Utah because there's this very long-standing history of racism. The stylist even mentions she can't get her family to move out there. But to zero in most specifically on Layla's story, the reason that she's having this hair loss is because there's just far fewer resources and education in Utah for styling black hair versus white hair. Layla said that a lot of people call her whitewashed, but to some extent, acting more white is a coping mechanism in a racist society. And so because of the church's racist history, there are fewer black people, fewer resources for black people, less education for white people about how to care for black hair. And so we see how the doctrine, the racist doctrine of the church, is culturally impacting Layla to the point that she's having hair loss. In the show, Layla is pretty nervous to tell Jesse that she's going somewhere else for hair, and this is the clip where Jesse notices the hair and her reaction.
Unfortunately, here in Utah, we don't have many black people or black stylists. And it's actually a big problem. Like, I think that, you know, like I just didn't get the education in school. And that's something I want to learn more about. No, like your hair needs to be treated differently and I want that for you.
I'm using your hair and like I always use like your shampoo and stuff like that. Just I think the installation.
Can I look at it though? I'm actually curious. And like actually get on your knees because you're so tall.
It's just at the top right here. So she put like the net on top and then sewed everything on. I didn't realize that ethnic hair needed to be treated differently.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is kind of just like a step of me starting to like embrace my other side of myself.
Yeah, and being proud of both sides. I think that's cute. Great.
Yeah. Love you.
You look amazing.
I do love how Jesse addresses how this is a really big problem in Utah. There are just not a lot of resources for black people or black people in general because of the racist history, because of the racist doctrine. I also love that Jessie leads with curiosity and respect. She asks permission. Hey, can I see how the stylist completed the hairstyle? I also saw this reel, which is that she had the stylist come to Jay-Z Styles to teach some of the techniques so that Jay-Z Styles can also be more inclusive. All of this is just to say that there's a very specific reason why things happen in culture, especially in what has historically been a very homogeneous culture in Utah, a very high demand religious culture. Most of what we see on the show is not just like coming from nowhere. It's all developing out of the roots of the doctrine that is then changing the way the culture is shaped. Another huge example is the love of sugar. We see the girls in all seasons sipping their sodas. We see when they go to an influencer event, there's this massive table of candy. And in most of the country, if there was an event like this, they would just simply have an open bar. But since this company that is having the event is a Mormon forward company, they do not have drinking. Instead, they embrace another vice that is not against the Mormon health code. It's not against the word of wisdom. So rather than seeing the girls sipping on cocktails, we see them gathering bags of gummy candy. This is also why we have huge sugary brands coming out of Utah like Crumble. I have a video about that. and Swig and other soda shops. The reason that this is happening, the roots, are the health code, the word of wisdom, no drinking, no coffee, no tea. Even green tea is against the word of wisdom. No vaping, no drugs of any kind. These are all of the parts of the doctrine that is taught by the church. The way this manifests in the culture is fewer coffee shops in high percentage Mormon communities, more sugary treats, more mommies baking cookies, crumble, swig, fizz, swish. Another great example of how doctrine impacts culture is the massive amount of cosmetic procedures all of these women have had, some more than others. Obviously, I saw this post, which is basically a carousel of all of the different confessionals throughout the 3 seasons. So you can see, for some of them, very drastically how much they've changed and how much work they've had done over the 3 seasons. This pales in comparison, though, when you compare it to how these women looked as teenagers when they had literally no work done. A lot of them have had veneers, Botox, lashes, eyebrows, hair extensions, thousands of dollars of changing the way that they look. Even the extent to which many of them have lost significant amounts of weight, which is crazy because they were very thin before, and now some of them are getting to the level of scary skinny. All of these attempts to change their appearance are wrapped up in this highly perfectionistic Mormon society. I think simply analyzing the billboards that you see in Utah also reveals a lot about the culture and the businesses that are being supported there. There's been many articles written about the types of billboards in Utah. Here are a few of the examples of the billboards you see driving up and down the I-15 in Utah. The most memorable one for me is this one. It says, "God is remodeling his temple. Isn't it time to remodel yours?" According to this article in Vice, it says that Salt Lake has 2.5 times more plastic surgeons than any other city its size. So now that we've discussed the branches, which is the beauty culture in Utah, let's discuss the doctrine, the roots of where this is coming from. One element is that Mormonism is highly focused on your appearance. This is said through the word countenance. So one belief is that the more righteous you are, the more you can see it on someone's face. So that's one reason Mormons love to smile. They love to be beautiful because they believe and teach that one way that you can spread the gospel, the belief in the church, is through your face, through your actual physical form. Another element is this idea of the path to perfection, that we should always be enduring to the end. We should always be progressing toward being more perfect. And there's never this moment, at least in this life, that you're good. You can always push the boundary of becoming more and more perfect. So the way this manifests for men is really any gender role that men are expected to do, that's what they're going to go for. So they're going to try to make more money, be better providers, have more kids. Those are the ways that they are trying to excel and become more perfect. For women, it's also have as many kids as possible, but it's also to be as beautiful as possible, to be as feminine as possible. That's why I think the beauty standard is so cruel for women and why there's so much talk of mommy makeovers, because you're supposed to pump out as many kids as you can while also simultaneously looking like you're still not a day over 16. A woman I had in my congregation in Texas said that she was literally having every year of her life dedicated to a different type of perfectionism. So she had 1 year of spirituality where she was reading the Book of Mormon, she was praying every day, then she was adding on beauty. So she was currently in her beauty year where she was getting all of the procedures done, she was getting her veneers put in, her hair was going to be perfect, she was going to be drinking lots of water, and she really viewed it as trying to become methodically as perfect as possible, because Mormons do legitimately talk about be therefore perfect, even as thy Father in heaven is perfect. That is a very core part of the doctrine. Unfortunately, though, when you have this doctrine that is asking people to try to be as perfect as possible, it creates a lot of feelings of inadequacy. And that's why I think we see women trying so hard and getting so many procedures done, because no matter what they do, because they're not perfect, literally perfect, they're always going to fall short of the mark. And that's how we get scenes like this with Jessie. Here she's talking to a therapist named Natasha Heffler and talking about her infidelity. And the therapist is like, what do you like about yourself? And Jessie has documented a ton on her social media of just how many procedures she's gotten. She's basically, I feel like probably if you took out a dictionary, a list of all of the existing procedures on the planet, she seems like she's done at least 50%. But this is what she says when Natasha asks her if she likes herself.
What do you like about yourself physically?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I feel like I've really struggled with like trying to change things. I also like have an online platform, and I think the biggest hate I get is about my looks. Like people tell me I look like a man that like transitioned into a woman, or I look 70 years old.
And this clip is why I feel like this perfection standard is so damaging, because it really makes women feel like no matter what they do, they're never going to be enough. Often plastic surgery is cast as women empowerment, but if you hate yourself after doing all of these modifications to your body, it really doesn't seem like it truly is empowering. It feels like it's feeding into this sense of insecurity that, in my opinion, was originally planted by a very patriarchal society. And so in the show, when we see cosmetic procedures, or when we see the men lashing out at the women and saying they deserve to be treated poorly, these things do not come from nowhere. They are the branches of the tree. And just because some of these women aren't attending church every Sunday doesn't mean they're not still going to be impacted by the doctrines they were raised with and the culture they're currently surrounded by. That is why I literally wrote an entire book about leaving the church, which many have mocked me for. If you want to leave the church, just stop attending. But when you are in a religion like Mormonism, it truly touches every single aspect of your life, including the most major aspects like children and marriage. To detangle yourself from a church like the Mormon Church, it takes investigating and examining every single aspect of your life, your career, your children, your relationships, oftentimes simply where you live, your education, the dreams and aspirations you were taught to have or told not to have. I think for me, I get really frustrated when people say that these women are not showing what being LDS is really, because some of the most intimate aspects of their lives have been heavily dominated by church doctrine and church culture. To be specific, I'm going to read the ages at which each of these women were married. So I'm going to do first marriages. Some of them have been divorced and remarried, but let's examine age of first marriage, and I'm going to compare that with the national average in the United States. Michaela was married at age 17. She was pregnant at age 16. We're going to get into that. Layla was married at 19. Jen was 19. Miranda was 20. Demi was 21. Taylor was 22. Jesse was 22. Macy was 23. And Whitney was 23. If you average those ages together, it means that the average age of marriage for these women was 20.7 years old. And as of 2023, in the United States, the average age for a man to be married was 30.6, and the average age for a woman to be married was 28.7. And so that is 8 years of difference between the average age of marriage and when these women were married. In the Mormon Church, marriage is doctrinally one of the most important things you can do. It's literally a saving ordinance. So just like a lot of people think you have to be baptized, in the Mormon Church, you have to be married to go to the highest level of Mormon heaven. There are many quotes from Mormon leaders about this. In the most recent conference speech from the prophet, the talk, he basically said, we don't want to follow the trend of the world that people are getting married older and people are having fewer kids. That's the doctrine, right? The prophet is speaking doctrine here. Do not delay marriage. There's also other quotes you can find saying, don't delay marriage, don't delay having children. I knew people who were getting engaged after knowing each other for 2 weeks at BYU. I grew up with quotes like this. This says that it is certain that almost any good man and any good woman, good meaning Mormon, any two Mormon people that are good can have a happy relationship and a successful marriage if both are willing to pay the price. Also, of course, there's no premarital sex. Premarital sex is known as the sin next to murder. And so with this combination of being told, hey, if you find a righteous guy, just get married to him. It'll work out, we promise. And well, you can't have sex before marriage. It creates this firestorm of a culture where people are just getting married super, super young. They're usually marrying the first person they have a serious relationship with. And that the impact of the doctrine is that we see very, very young marriages that are often unhappy because the people didn't really figure out if they were compatible first before tying the knot. According to this website, most couples date for 2 or more years before getting engaged, with many dating anywhere from 2 to 5 years. Once the question is popped, the average length of engagement is most often between 12 and 18 months. So this standard is, this average across the United States is not the norm in Utah. My friend was dating her boyfriend for a calendar year, and she actually got called into the bishop's office to be told, hey, you guys are being too casual about this. I have you here to reprimand you for not getting married soon enough. You need to take marriage more seriously. And when I highlight the ages of these women's first marriages, the reason I do that is to show, a lot of people are like, oh, reality TV is so scripted, you can't trust anything you see. The ages at which these women were married in their first marriages happened long before the show, long before any idea that they might someday be on a Hulu series. When you get married, that is like a bedrock of life decision. There are a few single decisions that have greater impact on who you marry and when, like the age at which you marry them. And so for these women and for people like me who are raised in the church, you are highly pressured to make one of the most important decisions of your life as young as possible. And do you know how hard it is to undo that? Like how difficult it is to detangle a marriage and multiple children by the time you're 23, 24, or 25. I simply refuse to be gaslit into believing that these women have not been deeply impacted by the Mormon Church. To read from this op-ed, it says, the great irony about Hulu's most popular unscripted drama, which claims to peel back the curtain on Latter-day Saint womanhood, is how little connection the show has to the Latter-day Saint faith. This to me is crazy because also most of these women in their first marriages were married in the temple. Most of them have worn garments. They're just, to wear garments. We had that scene in season 2 where they're all like reciting the young women's theme. These girls know Mormonism, and you can write op-eds in the Deseret News all day long saying there's no connection, but it's written all over every single one of their stories. And so for me, the reason I wrote this book was because this is a book I wish I had when I left the church, because this is just a sample size of how much thinking and effort I had to put into figuring out who I wanted to be after leaving this very, very domineering religion. I also served a mission. I went to BYU, baptized at 8. I did seminary. I did girls camp. I did EFY. I got married at 23, much younger than the average age. I only knew my husband for 9 months before, from the day of meeting to the day of our marriage was 9 months. My life was also deeply sculpted by this religion. And as much as members or the Deseret News want to make a fuss about me talking about it or about these women representing their stories on this TV show, I think we get to talk about it. Before we continue, just a quick reminder to like this video, subscribe to my channel. I have a reaction to season 1 and season 2 of the show if you want to check those out after this one. Drop a comment if you watch the show and you have your own feelings about it. Now I'm going to jump into some of the primary themes that stood out to me in the show. We'll get more into some of these storylines. I will also note that with 10 episodes, there is a lot that I feel like I need to talk about. I did make a separate Patreon video. This video is specifically like an ExMormon Mormon analysis. This video is a deeper dive into some of the storylines. For example, I shared my true thoughts about Whitney. I feel like she's probably one of the most debated characters on the show. So I shared my true feelings about whether or not I'm on Team Whitney or not. I also shared my thoughts on where they all come together in episode 10 and they're having like a conversation about what MomTok is going to be moving forward, and my analysis on how much the tone changes in the show. We see season 2 come out and suddenly Demi goes from being she's perceiving herself as the fan favorite to now trying to just be like, please let me back in. So I talked about that a little bit more. I also wanted to cover Macy being really rude to Layla at her birthday party, and Brett calling Miranda white trash on the phone as they're waiting for the season to premiere. I also just had so many feelings about Jordan getting relationship advice from Dakota of all people. And so all of that is included in my Patreon video. Let's jump into some of the themes that really stood out to me from season 3. I think for me, a core theme of the season was entitled men and submissive women, and how gender roles truly destroy authentic human relationships. I think all of their relationships reveal this to some extent, but I'm gonna focus in on Jesse and Jordan, and then we're also gonna talk about Michaela and Jace. To kick off this conversation, here is a clip from where Dad Talk is all together and they are discussing their wives and the women in the group. The reason that Dad Talk is all together in this scene is because they are basically rallying around Jordan. In the show, we find out that Jesse has kissed a guy named Marciano. She said twice. In the beginning, there's some disagreement about if there was more than those 2 kisses or not. In this scene, Jordan is basically processing what happened. He's trying to work through it, and he has the guys over at the house to try to come together and figure out what they're gonna do next. So let's watch.
You guys don't tell your wives what to do, right? Because they're their own people. But I just would hope, especially with kids involved, that
I'm pausing there because I love that he acknowledges you guys don't tell your wives to do, right? But I don't know if there should be a but after that statement, but here's the rest of the clip.
the best case scenario is hey, you guys should try to make it work.
I'm trying to think right now about just the way for the girls to have a conversation with you if you do want to be vulnerable.
It should be the girls and all the husbands. I don't think it's fair, if you put Jordan and 6 of these strong personalities in a room.
It's sad to say I don't feel like MomTok supports a lot of the relationships. I'm all for women empowerment. I just think it's sad that all these women have families and that's not the number one thing that they're pushing to fight for. And I think MomTok could learn a lot from Dad Talk, honestly.
So to reiterate what Zach is saying here and what they're all more or less saying, which is the women aren't doing enough to put family first, which is a very, very common Mormon sentiment. Here's the proclamation to the family. It says in this document, women are primarily responsible for the care and nurture of the children. And so to be clear here, the women, who, especially Zach here, who's just naming it, that they're feeling like the women aren't putting their families first. To be specific, these women almost exclusively are all the breadwinners. They're all making the income. All of them are birthing the babies. So a lot of them are pregnant in this season. His wife, Jen, is pregnant with their 3rd child. All of these women have been pregnant multiple times. They are making the money for the family. They are caring for the family. But we still have the men having this sentiment. The idea that the women are not doing enough and that the women are selfish, even though they are both the breadwinners and birthing the babies and have multiple pregnancies. And to me, this was quite audacious to hear, this idea that they're just, after all of that, after getting married so young and having multiple children and earning all the money for the family, they're just really not putting family first. I also think that what bothered me about this conversation is there's this undertone that when a woman is doing something for herself, that when the women, when the women see the men being rude to the women and they're like, hey, that's not right in your relationship, that is undermining the family and that is fundamentally wrong. That a woman standing up for herself in a toxic relationship is selfish and not putting the family first. The reason that they expect even more from their wives. They expect not just the women to be pregnant, not just for the women to make the money in this case, or to be bending over backwards to do all these things for their family. These men have been raised with the idea that women should be submissive, that a woman's greatest and most divine role from God is to be a wife and a mother, and that even if she must sacrifice her own independent identity in order to accomplish those roles, she should be willing to do it. This is written specifically in the doctrine. One example is the wedding ceremony itself. Within a temple marriage, when a man and a woman are married in a Mormon temple, you don't exchange vows. There's just a pre-read prayer. It's basically they read the same thing every time. And within that read statement during the marriage ceremony, it expressly says that the man will preside over the woman. So that's, to this day, still in the wedding ceremony for anyone married in the church currently. They are covenanting with God and with their spouse that the man is expected to preside over the woman. To read the definition of preside, it is to exercise guidance, direction, or control, and to occupy a place of authority. And so that's why we see, I think, Jordan and all these men kind of coming together to say, what are we going to tell these women? Like, we all need to be telling our wives the same thing, because as the presiding figures of authority, we get to dictate. We should be viewing ourselves as the one who are giving advice and giving guidance and direction to the women to say, you're not doing enough for your family. This is the document I just referenced. As I already read, it says, mothers are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children. Just as reference, this document, the proclamation to the family, is seriously in almost every Mormon home I've ever been in. There's always this document displayed very prominently. You can find online all sorts of like more artistic versions of it, but this is a core doctrine. This is a core document to Mormondom, and this is what it says about fathers. By divine design, so by God's laws here, by divine design, fathers are to preside over their families in love and righteousness, and are responsible to provide the necessities of life and protection for their families. So quite interesting here that even though the men are maybe no longer providing, they still perceive that they should be presiding over the family. And so with all of that in mind, right, that's the doctrine. The doctrine is the dad is presiding, the man is over the woman. Let's watch this scene between Jesse and Jordan. As I said, they're kind of going through their issues after this infidelity, the 2 kisses, and Jordan and Jesse are talking it out and deciding, like, where do we go from here?
You should be angry. He just threw you out your I know he did. Our kids are gonna grow up with their mom being a cheater in life to the entire world because he had to go and make those accusations. That's It's not okay. It's fucked up and it's completely not okay.
I'm just saying.
No, you need to take accountability. Like this is the issue right here. Like it's completely disrespectful and fucked up to our kids, to me, to my family. You're not gonna go to dinner with a guy that you had an affair with? You know who might be mad at him? Our son one day when he figures out what all you did. He might be mad at him.
And I'm gonna be honest with our kids.
You're gonna be honest with him that you disrespected their dad and you decided to go to dinner with the guy you had an affair with? Then you need help. Because that is 100% something that is disgusting.
Does he know he's being filmed? Like, I feel like I've gotten this feeling every single season where there's like a man just laying into a woman and you're like, so what is it like when there's no cameras? Because you must assume he's toning it down and he's still like saying it's disgusting, it's effed up. This to me is a very common dynamic whenever we see them arguing. It's not really an argument as much as him yelling at her while she's crying and like she's like quietly like which is not to say that she was in the right by kissing Marciano or whatever, but is to say that just because someone's done something you don't like actually doesn't give you license to yell at them. It's like she's his dog. It's like she's his possession, and he perceives that because she's wronged him, it's fully within his right to treat her however he chooses. He can yell, he can call her names, he can just treat her poorly because she's done something wrong, she deserves it. And I think it's very interesting because there's one word he uses multiple times to describe how he feels about the infidelity. And it's not the word heartbroken. You might think that like in a true love situation, when someone has infidelity within, you know, when you love someone and they're not faithful to you, my mind is like, I think my first word would be heartbroken. I'm just heartbroken that this happened. But that's not the word he uses.
Just being a dad now for myself, it really puts things in perspective about like just your family and just the lanes that you'll go to protect that. That's a tough spot to be in.
It's super emasculating.
100%. It would do the same to me.
You'll do anything to protect your family other than not yelling at your wife. I think too, some context we learn in the show is that Jordan for the last several years has been emotionally abusive. He's yelled at her a lot. This is something that she talks about in the show, and he also agrees that he's done it. Like they both kind of admit to it or agree upon this as a reality of their relationship. So the word I was gonna highlight from that clip is how Jordan said it's very emasculating. And that's a word he uses multiple times. Of all of the words that could bubble up in someone upon hearing that there's been infidelity in their relationship, emasculating is like the most Mormon coded word that I could think of. Like when he said emasculated, I literally wrote in my notes like emasculated. Of all of the ways this is emotionally distressing, the thing that he's highlighting is that being cheated on makes him feel like less of a man. And this is why I chose the theme as men are entitled, because to say that he's upset that he's been emasculated, it's like he's lost power because his wife has run away from him. It's not that he's sad that she no longer loves him, maybe, or that she's no longer interested in him in that way. It's what the loss of his wife says about his manhood. A note too here that there's no similar term for women. We certainly don't, like in the common parlance in conversation, effeminized is not a word that's used, which is because to be emasculated is insinuating that a man once had manhood and power and authority, and that that's been stripped away from him. And because women don't have power to begin with, a woman cannot have her power taken away from her. Another example of this is the word slut, which obviously everyone knows is almost certainly referring to a woman, because women are expected to have a single partner, and if they do not have a single partner, they're considered a slut or a whore. Whereas for men, there's no similar word that exists that denigrates him based on the number of sexual partners he's had. There are a lot of words that are very specifically gender coded. Another one is bossy or shrill, words that are only ever used almost exclusively to refer to women. While a woman is bossy, a man is simply a boss. While a woman is maybe shrill, a man is simply authoritative. And like I said, to be clear, I do not think Jesse was in the right to kiss Marciano. I also think when Marciano comes to visit and he's at the table at the dinner, she does seem really flirty and excited to talk to him. None of that I'm discounting here. However, as I already said, no matter how much someone bothers you, even if it's your own partner, nothing a romantic partner or friend could ever do gives you license to talk to them like that. You don't deserve to yell at someone just because they've wronged you. I think so often when I see these men interact with the women, it truly is like code switching, where we go from the men speaking so respectfully to each other, and then as soon as a woman enters the scene, if the man doesn't like something she's done, he has license as the presiding force to treat her poorly. And so often we also see the woman be submissive. She is like Jesse so often is, she covers her face. Do we see Jordan cover his face like that when he's talking to Jesse? I don't know. I watched the whole season. I've rewatched a lot of the clips. Maybe he does. Prove me wrong. I would love to be proved wrong. But what is more submissive than this action? And what is more domineering or authority coded than this? And we see, even just in their body language, how they are both occupying these ultra gendered positions within this disagreement. And that's why part of my beginning theme for this conversation was that these gender stereotypes, these gender roles fundamentally degrade the opportunity for true human connection, because rather than approaching this conversation with just like a curiosity and an emotional rawness, they both immediately start to occupy the gendered expectation of what they think they're meant to be doing. We often hear Jesse saying, I feel so guilty for not being a good enough wife. We see Jordan saying, I'm so mad she's not treating me the way I deserve. And it's like they can't quite slip past putting on this like, I'm a man, this is how I get to act. I'm a woman, this is how I should act. And it's like it bars them from just being able to connect about what happened in a real, authentic human way. Speaking of body language, there was a moment later on that really stood out to me because we see Jesse emotional in a different setting. So basically, Dakota has this texting situation with someone Taylor knows. Taylor's upset. Jesse and her talk about it for the first time. And Taylor's getting really upset. And we see Jesse, like I'll put the clip here. She gets closer to Taylor. She pulls her in. You can see on her face like that even as Taylor starts to cry, that Jesse also is starting to have like a very authentic emotional reaction. And in that scene, I was like, we're seeing more emotional vulnerability between Taylor and Jesse than I ever saw between Jesse and her husband. Jordan and Jesse are always super far apart. He's laying into her. She's covering her face. She's crossing her arms. I don't even think we see them really holding hands in most of these scenes. They're sitting very far apart. But yeah, this moment with Jesse and Taylor, I was like, it's so sad to me how a woman being taught to be submissive to her husband keeps her from being vulnerable with him, and a man being taught to preside and dominate over his wife keeps him from being vulnerable with her. They're both just like, it's like watching a play. They're just playing out. They have their roles. They know what they're supposed to be doing. One will take it, one will give it. And it was so eye-opening to me to see Jesse in a truly raw and emotional situation with Taylor. And that reaction was just so much more real and authentic and caring than anything we ever see with Jordan. To go back to the show, here's a little bit more of their conversation on the couch.
Even though you have valid points, like when you talk to me like this, it just is like, how?
Yeah, it's how it used to be, right? Yeah.
This is what Jordan does when he gets upset. He'll like attack my character. He'll call me names.
You also need to understand, this is completely justified. It is.
I think it would have been more productive if we could have had a conversation and like you asked me questions and I explained, and yeah, I
don't think there's anything more for us to discuss right now. This is exactly why I've treated you the way that I've treated you.
So as we see, he's saying, I deserve to treat you this way. And I truly think that the roots of this is the doctrine of presiding over women. He's been raised to believe that his wife will be submissive to him. He's been raised to believe he gets to say what happens. He gets to dictate the relationship. And I brought this up with Taylor with season 2, because even if it doesn't excuse the behavior, I'm not saying Jordan deserves to be able to yell, obviously, at his wife, but I do think it explains the behavior, because I think it explains why he feels entitled to act this way. So many people are like, I see on comments all the time, like, why do all the men treat their wives this way? And it's because of those roots. It's because of these doctrines, this idea that men are in charge, this idea that men should have, you know, women maybe get a little input, but men should have the overall final say on a lot of these things that happen. When Taylor's dad in season 2 yelled at her and is slut-shaming her, he's like, what does this say about you that you would go sleep with Dakota? The reason he's doing that is because he's been raised to believe that premarital sex is the sin next to murder. He's been raised to believe that women are the gatekeepers of virtue, that men are basically animals without any ability to curb their appetites, and that women are the ones that should say no, and women are the gatekeepers of sex and chastity. And it doesn't excuse Taylor's dad yelling at her, but it does explain why he feels like the right thing to say when she's already crying her eyes out is that it's her fault and she should there's a lot of take accountability conversations from the men. Even as the women are crying at their feet, having been honest, it's like, you're still not taking accountability. And I think it's not even just about presiding over the family. It's not even just this gender dynamic on earth. It also extends into heaven, because in heaven, men are taught that they will preside as kings over their own galaxies. They'll receive all the Father hath, and they'll continue to preside over their wife or wives, because polygamy is also a thing in heaven, in Mormon heaven. And it's just that I think because Mormon men are basically promised the world, promised everything, and promised a sidekick who's going to have their babies and make their food and do their laundry and clean their toilets, they really are, if the woman falls short of that, it's like a total meltdown, because they've been raised since they were kids to believe that everything is theirs. It was also interesting because there's a scene where after Dad Talk gets together, Macy's husband goes back and talks to her and gives her a talking to. And in this initial, basically her husband is like, you need to tell the women that they need to prioritize their family. And she's like, I'm not the Relief Society, I'm not the Relief Society president. I'm not their mommies. They're my friends, but ultimately their decisions are their decisions. But I did think it was so interesting how after the men get together, even Macy's husband flips and is like, oh, it's not me and my wife. It's men versus women, and I need to go home and preside to my wife. We all just decided, sure, women can make their own decisions, but he seems like probably one of the least toxic of all of them. But even that scene where he goes to try to why aren't you telling the women to make their family more of a priority? And I'm sure that all these women are just like, I'm doing everything. I'm making the money. I'm pregnant. I'm making the TikTok dances. And yet, despite the women basically seeming to more or less do both jobs, the male's job and the female's job, the men still perceive that they're presiding over the woman. I think it really just goes back to the perfection conversation, why no matter how beautiful the women are, they want to be skinnier, they want to be hotter. No matter how much they're making, they should be making more. No matter how many babies they've had, they should consider having one more. It's truly never enough. And no matter how much they sacrifice and they're everything to everyone, you can't be perfect. And so they just over and over again have their husbands complaining it's still not enough. And I think these dynamics playing out over and over again, because there's ultimately just a power imbalance, is keeping these people from having authentic connections with their spouses, which everyone deserves. Everyone deserves to connect authentically with their partner in life. And I also think an element with Jesse and Jordan was this idea that to be married is to show you're successful. Divorce is a failure. Divorce is so taboo in the church. And it's the way that it's just the vines are wrapping around you, where you have to get married so young, and then divorce is the biggest taboo, the biggest personal failure imaginable. I literally, as I was taking a break, I saw this post on Reddit. It says, they're still doing this in 2025 for a young women's activity. And I did this activity, which is an activity where for a church night for the youth, these girls are between 12 and 18 years old, you dress up in wedding dresses. And you prepare you're like, well, what do I want to wear? Look at the veil. And it's you have these 15-year-olds in wedding dresses, and it's just the level of indoctrination in these types of activities is insane. And we have these people in this show who are getting married so young, trying to do every single thing the church is showing them is success and perfection. And they wonder why am I unhappy? And it truly does make me depressed. And we're about to jump into Michaela and Jace. This is a whole nother conversation, but I truly think that women sacrificing everything for perfection is so damaging. I've seen so many unhappy women in the church, and they're doing everything. They have the babies, they're making the house perfect, and the woman just is like so trodden upon and unhappy. And I think it's so sad that instead of encouraging women to do what makes them happy, they're told to be a perfect wife and mother. I found this statistic, and it says a 10% increase in mean maternal happiness is predicted to increase social skills in children by an amount equivalent to $50,000 in income. And I recommend reading through this study if you're interested, but it basically is linking maternal happiness to child success and just how significant that success is, how much more it's worth if the mom is simply reporting that she's happy. The message in the Mormon Church should not be that kids deserve perfect mothers. It should be that kids deserve happy mothers. Another example of entitled men and submissive women and how that destroys authentic human relationships is Michaela and her husband, Jace. To give some explanation, Michaela has chronic health concerns. She's also pregnant in season 3, and we find out that Michaela and Jace are having some relationship issues, the heart of which is that because Michaela has a history with sexual abuse and trauma, she's having a hard time connecting sexually with her husband.
So on a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate yourself as like a sexual being or like your sexual interest?
Mine's pretty low.
Okay.
Like a 1 or a 2.
Okay.
I feel like when I'm never getting it, it's like a 10. If I got my way, I would do it like 3 times a day.
Whew. So I feel like that scene, really all the scenes, I mean, there's other scenes where he's like, if we're not having sex, it's like a deal breaker. So to be clear, Michaela has 4 kids with this man, so they're at least doing it a little bit. That's a lot of children. She's pregnant in this scene. So there's, the way you get pregnant is having sex. So they're definitely doing some of that. But to give a broader step back here, the way that their relationship started was that when she was 16 and he was 20, he got her pregnant, basically. And then they got married when she was 17 and he was 21. When I first reacted to this, I was like, is that even legal? I guess in Utah, of course, it is legal. There's something called the Romeo and Juliet law. So the pretense or the context, I guess, of their relationship was technically legal, which is not to say that what is legal is moral, of course. In some of what she said about their relationship, she said that she initially lied about her age, which would not hold up in court if it was illegal. The man is still the one that's the adult in that situation, but she said that she didn't tell the truth about her age. She also said that she had only known him for like a month before she got pregnant. She was escaping her abuse situation. She left her home at about 15, and she was living with her sister, which is then when she meets Jace. He says multiple times in this season that he feels unloved when he is not having sex. Even though they have 4 kids, she has chronic health issues, she's making the money for the family, she's doing she's juggling all the balls, and yet we still have a man who feels entitled to sex. And without it, even though she's born 4 children for him, he still says he feels unloved. On the flip side of that, because just like Jesse and Jordan, we're going to see a relationship in which both of the people are acting out their gender roles, just like the man feels entitled to his wife having sex with him. We see the woman feeling deeply guilty for not being able to submit herself to the point of just giving it to him, even if she doesn't want it. We see Michaela say over and over again that she feels like really deeply guilty that she can't give her husband what she thinks he needs. I think both Jesse and Michaela have good wife syndrome is how I think of it. Like they just fundamentally, it's like they're not even really considering like, what do I want in the relationship, as much as they are just feeling really guilty for not giving the man what he needs in the relationship. And when they can't submit to the point of just being that perfect wife, rather than taking that as evidence of like, hey, maybe something's like not working here and I need to adjust, or make it more clear like, I'm going to put my foot down with my needs too, just like you're doing. Rather than that, the women continuously just feel guilty and less than and like they are worthless because they cannot simply submit to the point of being the perfection that their husband demands. I have seen people saying like Jace's support of Michaela is admirable. There are certain portions where he's like, I want you to go to therapy. I want you to get the help you need. It much of the time seems to be under the context of like, I hope my wife gets therapy so that she'll have sex with me, which is like ultimately still a selfish, you know, hey, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy, because until you work on your problems, you're not gonna have sex with me. So I do see people saying that Jace's support of Michaela is admirable. I do feel like it's like the bar is so low we're tripping over it to some extent. And I'm not trying to downplay the fact that like I know sex is an important component and a factor of a relationship, which is another reason why starting a relationship so young can be very detrimental and starting a relationship before ever having sex can also be detrimental because you're just really going in blind there. But we also see the producers filming their door at one point when Jace is upset at Michaela and he's yelling at her. So like, I get that he's more supportive in some scenes, but behind closed doors, he's just doing the same thing that all these men are doing, which is that when the rubber hits the road and the man is not getting what he wants and he feels upset and he feels frustrated, he feels entitled to yell at his wife. And in all of these cases, at least from what I've seen so far, I think Taylor's the only one we've seen yell back. But in most of these cases, the women just like cover their face, make themselves small. They revert to submission. Like we hear Jace's voice through the door, yelling, yelling, yelling. We do not hear Michaela coming back. It's just silent. I just feel like in so many of these cases, these men feel deeply entitled to presiding and commanding their wives to do what they want. And Jace often seems like nicer about it than Jordan, but he's still asking for it. This is a post from Jace's Instagram from way back when they first were together. And the caption is, "She has sacrificed so much of her life, and I'm so in love." And so here, once again, we see a woman's goodness and value being connected to her ability and willingness to sacrifice herself for the greater good of the man and the family. I honestly think that Michaela and Jace's story is probably one of the saddest storylines. I just feel like both of their families failed them. I mean, age gap relationships are very normalized in Utah and amongst Mormons, but you know, she's sexually abused in her childhood. When she's 15, she goes and leaves home. She leaves home before she even graduates high school. He is with her. They seemingly start a sexual relationship very quickly. She gets pregnant within a month of meeting him. And where are the adults? This is the impact of babies having babies, is that no one seems to be stepping in. I mean, in this post that I saw of his, he's playing piano in front of the temple. They don't have a lot of sex ed. The sex ed rating for Utah is very low. They don't understand how to prevent pregnancy, or I guess he's choosing not to. We're not sure. I think you could assume, though, that because there's very little sex ed, it's just abstinence-only sex education, that they're not getting sufficient information to make sure that this doesn't happen. No one is saying, hey, 20-year-old or 21-year-old, don't go for the high schooler. And now it feels like, what do we want them to do? This is the impact of get married as quickly as possible. This is the impact of have as many children as possible. This is the impact of no sex before marriage and no sex education. It's that Michaela and Jace are now so far down this path that to just say let's end this relationship is incredibly difficult. To pull apart a relationship that's this far along, that's this intertwined. They have a house, they have 4 kids, they're married. They've been set on this path so young that now they're especially for Michaela, she's just now finally even confronting her trauma from her childhood. And she has 4 children of her own. I felt like it was so sad when I was looking through her Instagram too, because she has no pictures of her first pregnancy that she posted on her Instagram. They have pictures of the baby. They have pictures of them before their relationship or before the pregnancy, but she doesn't just have like that quintessential mommy holding her tummy picture. And it's like crazy that the pregnancy itself was more shameful than the fact that a 21-year-old got her pregnant. And as much as I want healthy relationships for everyone, it feels difficult when he's basically saying no sex is a deal breaker, but he also has a wife who's had 4 of his babies, and she has chronic health issues and sexual trauma from her childhood, and she's pregnant in therapy trying to just work through it so she can just like keep giving him what he needs. And the pretense of the whole therapy is like, I'm going to therapy because I want to work it out so I can give my husband what he needs. Not that she's going to therapy for herself. I'm sure if she was too selfish, we'd have another dad talk conversation about why these women aren't putting their family first. It's so dark to watch, honestly. I've seen a lot of like ex-Mormons being like, this show gives me like flashbacks to the toxic relationships I've escaped. There's a scene that I'll show you with Macy, and she's giving the definition of what a trad wife. She's talking about, they're making jokes about trad wives, and she basically lists through everything that is expected of a trad wife. So let's watch that clip.
I'm ready. I feel like I look like I should be doing dishes, like a house maid in this outfit. A little milkmaid, like a housewife, a trad wife. And my husband just makes the money, and I just cook and I clean and milk the cows. Milk the cows. And spread my legs. Is it down on the way?
Oh. And when I saw that, I was like, I actually feel like the admission that what is at the heart of a trad wife is that in exchange for supporting her financially, for a trad wife to get the money and have the pretty house and have the lavish life, open your legs. And I feel like that is, to me, it just felt like foreshadowing to this Jason Michaela conversation, which is crazy because it's not even like he's providing for her financially. From what I can tell, she's making all the money here. But I saw this comment on Reddit, and it says that in Mormon relationships, being told that you must not love your spouse if you're unwilling to have intercourse whenever they desire it. And I do feel like this is very core to so many Mormon relationships. It's very core to basically any relationship that has like really strict gender dynamics and roles, which is that women, if they're being provided for, that they should just spread their legs whenever the man wants. And I just feel like that's like the dark side of trad wives. I feel like it's this transactional nature of this gendered dynamic. I mean, it's kind of like describing a prostitute, like what prostitution is, that the woman is there to put on a show and to be hot and to open her legs, as Macy says, and that the man is buying this by providing financially. Even though Jace does seem like a little bit of a sad puppy dog that's just like, I want to feel more loved, it's like he's still not seeing past his own needs to see his wife. And on the note of like, what do they do from here? You know, does she leave him with these 4 kids? Like, maybe. I mean, everyone was like, Jen, leave your husband. Jen, leave your husband. Nope. That's not really, like, this is another part of this, like, Mormon doctrine roots. And then up here in the culture is like, divorce is really not an option. I saw so many people being like, Jen needs to divorce her husband. And I'm just like, there's no way. Same with Michaela. And honestly, I do feel like this pushing you down the path situation that Mormonism does, where it pushes you through all these major life decisions that are very difficult to walk back once you've made them. Once you have kids, it's just like, okay, now I have to take care of these children. I have a massive responsibility. I think when I saw all the conversations about Taylor's dad yelling at her in season 2, I think as I thought more about that situation, Taylor's dad who's yelling at her is actually her stepdad. Her biological dad is not in the picture. And so while we see a man who we dislike for doing yelling, she sees a man that was willing to stick around and care enough to yell, to care enough to just like have a say about her life, because her dad, her biological dad, he left, and we don't even yell. It's like the internet isn't mad at her biological dad because like no photo found. And so it's difficult to criticize people in these situations, because when you are leaving a really bad situation, like Michaela leaving her abuser's home, she's leaving her mom's home where she's being abused. Sure, like her new situation from the outside looking in also looks really bad, but all she sees in her short life of just a few decades, she's still very young, all she sees is this man who has provided for her, who has loved her, who has been, she describes him as her anchor, her biggest best friend. And sure, it's easy for us to be like, oh, this is a messed up situation. But based on her lived experience, it's actually way less messed up than what she came from. And for Taylor, even though her dad yelling at her is really messed up, it's still like more love than she got from her biological dad. And so I feel like it's so easy for the internet to sit back and just be like, why would they stay in this situation? But when you're coming from a toxic background, from a high demand religion that's taught you all of these really damaging messages about yourself, and then you do feel like you have this strand of goodness in your life, the way that you're perceiving your reality is much different than the way the rest of us are just like seeing it from the big screen, which is why, Taylor has said like, I defend my dad, which is why Michaela is like, I love my husband. It's just like, we can't quite comprehend what's really going on for these people. And that's why this whole Michaela Jace situation just gives me a stomach ache. People online, like, it's so interesting to read the comments. This is similar for Whitney, where like some comments are like very pro Whitney, some comments are like, I'll never like her. Same with Jace. They're like, he's such a loving, supportive husband. Where do I find a man like that? And then other people are like, he's her abuser. She needs to leave him. And in this scene where they're doing therapy, he gets really upset, like, because he's perceived, from my interpretation, he's hurt her feelings, and his leg is just like shaking, and he's like looks really upset. And that's why my theme is that religion and Mormon gender dynamics really keep people from having authentic human connection, because it's like everybody is just reverting back to this very offset power dynamic that does not allow people to just like have authentic connection. For Michaela and Jace, like, what do you do when this is the life that you've basically been handed? This is the life you put yourself on at 16 and 20 for him. Like, yes, it's a very messed up situation, but like, what do we want them to do now? And I think that most of the messiness of the show is watching these women try to actively take back the reins of their own life after letting the church steer the ship, ride on the horse for so long. It's just that that's what most of this show is. Like, most people got to have their life, they got to live through their mid-20s. Like I said, the average age of marriage for a woman in the US is 28.7 years. And these women didn't get those 8 years. These women were only a couple of years legal. Some of them weren't even legal. And they are married and pregnant. And now they have to find themselves in a much higher stakes situation than most people have to find themselves. Now they're finding themselves while also changing diapers, having pregnancy hormones, having a husband who's also dealing with his own like way he's been taught to be. And that's why this is so complicated, because most people, when they find themselves, they simply get to discover themselves. But now these women have to discover themselves under the context of having so many major life decisions that if they make a misstep, then this whole thing explodes on them. So it is really sad, and that's why high demand religion can be so damaging, because to be pushed down the life path of making so many decisions before you're even really fully formed as a human being means that you have to cope with coming to your own knowledge of yourself when the stakes are so high that you can't make mistakes and you can't experiment. You just simply have to stay in the box. On a lighter note about Jace, I made a reel recently, a TikTok video about how Mormons like to backflip, and I'll say a lot of people made fun of me for it, but because they're like, why are you drawing all these false conclusions? Whatever. The reason I wanted to bring it up is because I found a video of Jace backflipping on his Instagram, and I was like, see, the Mormons. The Mormon men, they are backflipping. This brings us to our next theme. I wanted to pick something like diet feminism, or maybe like lip service feminism, doormat feminism. It's like a feminism that serves the patriarchy. I'm not really sure what I want to call it specifically, but that kind of generally encapsulates what I'm going for here. For me, when I hear them talk about being girls, or women supporting women, or smashing the patriarchy, to me it feels like they read about feminism on the back of a cereal box, but like they generally know the right verbiage to use, but they aren't acting in the way that I think is truly representing women supporting women. I think Demi is the best example of this, or maybe the worst example of feminism in action. She uses a lot of equality-minded speech, like therapy speech or feminist speech, things like girls, or women supporting women. And then we get scenes with her like this. This is her when she's gonna try to go in to give Layla a hug.
I'm getting a little bit nervous.
Hell? When she said what are you doing? I don't. She said that. You don't what?
So as you can tell here, Layla is like not wanting to hug her. And I guess to some extent, if you think someone's your friend and you go to hug them, I could see being like, what's going on? But like the what the hell of it all is surprising to say the least. We also have this screenshot. This is a different scene where she's getting mad at Jesse and she does this motion, as you can tell. There's just so many moments. Another one that I talked about in my Patreon video is when Brett, her husband, is on the phone with her and he calls Miranda white trash. Wow, choice words. I feel like if you're like a true girl's girl, as she's asking the other women to be continuously, she's like, why don't you guys support me? Why don't you believe me? Which we're getting to. This is not how women should be. We see over and over again that she also is just being very callous, very rude, very disrespectful, not a true friend at all to all of these women she's surrounded by. Another element that I talked about on my Patreon video is that in this scene, Demi still thinks she is the fan favorite. So in season 2, we see that Demi is at dinner with all the women and she's like, it's no surprise I was the fan favorite. And in this scene, and basically through all of season 3, Demi still thinks that everyone being the internet, loves her and is like fully in her corner. And then when season 2 premieres and it's very clear that she's the villain of season 2, that's where we get the episode 10 where Demi's like, I'm a total C word and how can I get back with the group? And suddenly she's very willing to be apologetic and to be very kind. And she's like, I hope we can all come together. I hope we can all be part of MomTok again. And it's so crazy to see this shift where here she thinks she has the internet's full love. And then once she realizes she's the villain, like Whitney was the villain in season 1, she's just like, oh no. Never mind, I'm not the boss bitch. I have to do whatever it takes to get back into these women's good graces. But when she's treating Layla like this, she definitely still thinks she's like on top. A core part of Demi's story in season 3 is the Marciano story. And we get a conversation about believing women. That's basically Demi's whole storyline, I feel like, in season 3, is that she says Marciano sexually assaulted her, and she has to deal with some questioning around whether she really was or not, which is a very real issue that many sexual assault survivors have to face, is this element of being believed. And we also know that Michaela, when she reports her abuse, is not believed. And so in Demi's case, we see a major part of her storyline for season 3 being that she's made this claim, and now she's defending the claim, and there's a lot of conversation around that. And in season 2, we also saw Demi make another claim against a man. This one was caught on camera. The one with Marciano, there's no footage so they don't include that. But in season 2, we see Chase basically push her hip, is what she's saying. Then she runs upstairs to talk to Brett, and she says that Chase just laid hands on me. If you're familiar with that expression, typically that means to hit. And you can see from Brett's reaction, he literally sprints out of the room. He runs towards Chase. We all kind of anticipate he's gonna punch him in the face to defend Demi, because she's ran upstairs to be like, he laid hands on me. I'm sorry, that sounds like he hit you. Not the unwanted touch is okay, but to describe someone pushing past you and maybe tapping you on the hip briefly, we got it mostly on camera, kind of a weird angle, but like everyone in the room is like, oh, he's being a little like obnoxious, true, and he was just shaking his finger at Taylor, true. But to describe that action with those words is, I think most people agree, an overreaction and simply dishonest. It's saying someone assaulted you when it's not, like, he didn't punch you in the face. To say laid hands on me sounds like a slap, sounds like a punch in the face. And so, with all this context of how Demi described Chase touching her, we have this new allegation that Marciano sexually assaulted her, which is a very serious allegation. This is an allegation that has ended the lives of many men, as it should. You know, there's a scene where she talks to someone Marciano previously dated, and the woman literally says, like, can you take it back? And Demi says no. Also, to be clear, Demi is not filing charges against Marciano, as you might think someone would if they were sexually assaulted. She also apparently has texted photos of her daughter or a video of her daughter praying to Marciano, allowed her daughter to FaceTime with him. There's a scene where Layla asks Demi about this situation with Marciano, and she's like scrolling through, Demi is like scrolling through pages and pages of texts. And all of this is just making a lot of the women say, it seems a little suspect. Here's another scene where Demi is talking to Macy, and if you listen, you can basically hear Demi saying, everyone should believe me because all victims deserve to be believed, and because of the other women having assault against them in the past, the fact that they're not believing me is even worse.
I saw comments from the other women in favor of Marciano and against me, basically calling me a liar, asking why was I continuing conversation with him afterwards if this happened. Just the classic case of victim blaming. I don't know if that's you specifically, or if it's Michaela specifically. I really hope not, given what happened to both you and Michaela. I would hope that you would be like, hey, if something happened, I'm gonna believe you, because that's why people don't come forward and talk about it.
And so in this clip, we see Demi basically making the point that anyone who ever makes this claim about sexual assault, it should be believed, and unless there's evidence against it, the default should be belief. And she also says, like, hey, Macy, this happened to you, this happened to Michaela, and the fact that you're not believing me actually shows you're not a good woman, you're not enough of a feminist, because in this situation, we should all stick together. I did some research online, and there's not a lot of evidence to show how often false reporting of assault happens. I did find this quote. It says, when rigorous research is conducted based on this definition, estimates for the percentage of false reports converge around 2% or 8%. And for me, when I was watching Demi's storyline, and this idea of women supporting women means believing all women all the time, no matter what, in cases of sexual assault, I also think of the story of Emmett Till. And that's a story I've talked about in this video. I taught the story of Emmett Till to my 9th graders the first year and only year I was ever a 9th grade teacher. And I taught that story in Utah. And I won't get into in this video how teaching that story went, even though I definitely recommend checking out that video. But basically, in the story of Emmett Till, he was a 14-year-old boy who was lynched in the 50s. But in Emmett Till's story, the initial event that led to his death was that a woman named Carolyn Bryant said that he specifically whistled at her and made lewd advances and grabbed her. And later, after his death, after his lynching, she said she lied. She went on the record and said that she had lied about the initial event. Because Carolyn Bryant lied about what happened, it led to the death and the lynching of a 14-year-old boy. Honestly, with that story in mind, and with this report in mind, it is rare that women lie about assault. This report says between 2 to 8% of the cases. Some women have lied about it. With that said, many, many, many women have told the truth about it and not been believed. I think my frustration with this idea of everyone should believe women all the time, no matter what, is that it still creates this box, this pedestal that we put women on, that women are angels. It's still treating women differently than just allowing them to be human. It's very much this like Madonna whore complex that is so commonly shown, that either women are the temptresses, the sinners, the whores, or women are these pure, illustrious angels that can do no wrong. And neither of those paradigms allow women to simply be human. If we step back from these two ways of viewing women, which is either the Madonna, the pure, the perfect, or the whore, the awful, the sinner, if we allow women to be human, it does permit us to simply analyze stories and what's happened in the lives of women on a human level, rather than approaching them with this like one-sided view of what women can or can't be. Humans can lie, humans can tell the truth, humans can be cruel, humans can be kind. Humans can also weaponize the language of feminism while refusing to follow its basic tenets. Here's another clip where they show some of the texts between Marciano and Demi, and these texts would have taken place after she said that there was a sexual assault.
Felt like I needed to defend me. Everyone's showing me these receipts, and my first initial feeling and thought was like, this is confusing, this is weird.
He writes, LOL, don't be a baby. She responds, it's no different than swallowing cum.
Whitney, you seem like you're friends with Demi, but it seems like she's lying to Brett. Do you believe her?
That just makes me so uncomfortable to even answer that question. I'm the only one in the group that's been supportive of Demi. Why didn't Demi ever talk about these conversations with me? Like, we talk about everything. Why aren't you talking to me about this?
And so those are the texts, and then here's a snippet of Whitney and Connor discussing if they believe Demi or not.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked from the recording. I'm shocked from the text messages. Like, if you were to open my phone and see me having conversations like that, how would you feel?
Oh, I would feel like there was definitely a connection. I feel like there was totally a fling going.
I would be like, this is so incredibly inappropriate. Yeah. And vice versa.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm just like, I don't know what to think. Like, the Demi I know wouldn't do that, but then there's a recording of you like trying to convince Jen to say something.
And so obviously there's this element of wanting to believe when a woman comes forward about something like this, but then there's also the element of not wanting to say that a man has done this thing, which is so horrible and so serious, if he hasn't done it, especially with all of this other context around the texting and the pictures, and then also the story with Chase where she said he put his hands on me, even though a lot of people in the room saw what happened and wouldn't have described it in the same way. On a broader scale, I think that in season 2 and season 3, we just see Demi so continuously treat other women so poorly that it's hard to see her brandish the sword of feminism in defense of herself when she's not willing to use the sword to protect other people. Truly, I think feminism is about protecting the weak and advocating for equal rights. It's not about weaponizing language to defend yourself and destroy other people. I think when you throw other women under the bus, as soon as it becomes convenient, that's not feminism. That's not being a girl's girl. And I feel like there's a lot of hypocrisy in Demi and in a lot of the ways that the women are saying we're defending women or we're empowering women, because it's truly just when it's convenient and it's not every day in every way. The next storyline I wanted to highlight is when some of the women go to a pride event. They talk about BYU's stance on same-sex romantic behavior. They talk about pride flags, the laws in Utah, and the church's stance on gay people in general.
In light of all the recent anti-LGBTQ legislation that passed in Utah, MomTok wants to make sure that we are supporting our community. And so we want to throw a little pride event to show our support and that we are allies.
What you see happening behind me is the result of the passing of House Bill 77. It would remove or ban pride flags from being on government property or in schools. This group of people says their identity is being erased.
Me and Jacob are both active members of the LDS Church. However, we do not stand with the church's stance on going against the LGBTQ community.
As you can see, Macy is saying that even though she's a member of the church and she attends, she doesn't agree with the stance on gay people within the church. And we also see her go, she basically goes to the store and puts a pride flag up in her yard. And I feel like I have very mixed feelings about people who want to claim allyship with the LGBTQ community, but also still pay 10% of their income to the church. They still attend every Sunday. I know there is something to be said about changing an organization from within. I get it. I also, in my video about Mormon authors, I showed a clip of Brandon Sanderson basically saying that he is still a member even though he doesn't agree with the church's stance on gay rights. If I had to name it, it feels like a bit of a cop-out. I just feel like if you know that a church's doctrines are driving people to try to end their lives, for me in that same position, I don't think it's worth supporting. One of the biggest moments that really made me frustrated with the church was when the church said that if two gay people have a child, that child is not allowed to get baptized, which is basically saying that even the child is evil because they have evil gay parents. Homophobia really does run very deep in Utah. I found this report from the Trevor Project. It's specific to Utah. It doesn't, within the report, compare it to national averages, but I am going to read some of the stats that I found. 42% of LGBTQ plus young people in Utah seriously considered suicide in the past year. We have 66% of LGBTQ young people in Utah reporting experiencing symptoms of anxiety. And so if almost half of this population within Utah is reporting considering ending their lives in Utah, that's a huge issue. These are young people. Almost half of the young people are reporting seriously considering that. And I just think that to continue to send your money to an organization that is propping up this homophobic culture, that is teaching a homophobic doctrine, I do not think that that is moral. I also thought that this was sad. It said that of the people who wanted mental health care but were unable to get it, the number one reason is can't afford it. But the number 2 and 3 reason is I was afraid to talk about my mental health concerns with someone else, and I did not want to have to get my parent or caregiver's permission. That's 36%. And so a huge reason that the youth that are in this situation aren't getting care is fear of someone else's opinion. Macy also notes that strong opinions come with backlash. And to me, I feel like to some extent, this storyline of the pride flag did feel, I don't know. It's like I want to support people who are like voicing allyship, but also to simultaneously support the organization and to say, I'm still going to get a temple recommend. It does feel a little hollow. I am not a member of the queer community, but as someone who does feel very strongly about it, people who only halfway support by still paying tithing and still attending, I feel from my perspective, it simply feels like hollow support. Within the storyline of the Pride event, they do also talk about BYU's stance on same-sex romantic behavior. I'll put to the side here, this is from the university's website, which is basically banning all same-sex romantic behavior. I think this is very much a slap in the face because as much as the church would like to make it seem like we just preach celibacy, and so, BYU students, if you're not married, just be celibate. So we're asking our gay students to just be the same as everyone else because everyone's celibate at BYU. It actually is past that because it's not just about celibacy, it's about holding hands. It's about all romantic behavior because straight students who are dating can hold hands, they can have a peck on the cheek, they can put their arm around each other. But this policy bans even those actions, which is past the law of chastity and just straight up is banning anything, any romantic behavior at all from any LGBTQ student. Let's watch the clip where they address that.
BYU's honor code prohibits same-sex romantic behavior. And I know it's not the same thing, but when I was at BYU, I definitely broke the honor code when I got pregnant out of wedlock. So I feel like I can relate, and I don't think it's fair that the students have to live in fear of being kicked out based on who they choose to love. I do love BYU. I had a great experience there. However, I do think a lot of their policies are outdated and need to be updated to fit the times. There are plenty of active Mormons like Jacob and I that fully support the LGBTQ communities. And there's plenty of active members who are gay as well, but they're just in the closet or they're too scared to come out. And I hope that they can feel loved and supported and that we can adapt to the times.
I do feel that BYU has a very toxic environment. There's even a way that you can report. I've talked about this in other videos, but BYU encourages students to rat on each other, basically. They have a portal where you can go anonymously report someone breaking the honor code. And I remember when I attended BYU, I was really sad one day because it was when my parents were in the process of getting divorced. And I was walking with my friend and I was crying while walking because I was really upset. And she grabbed my hand just to like briefly, hold my hand and squeeze and be like, it's going to be okay. And in the very moment, basically, as she was grabbing my hand to squeeze it and to give me a show of support, we had a car drive past and literally a guy leaned out the car and yelled a homophobic slur at us. And I remember in that moment just being like my brain is so fixated on this like sadness. And even in that moment, just feeling like, this is so crazy that I just briefly, my friend is holding my hand because I'm really distraught. And immediately, in the moment, someone is yelling this slur at us. And I can only imagine what it's like for people who are gay to be students at BYU and to have to face this environment where even holding hands is so demonized that even I experienced someone yelling a slur at me when someone briefly held my hand just to show me a little support. Like, that was one tiny instance. I cannot imagine going to BYU and being a member of the LGBTQ community and having to face this type of rhetoric and this type of homophobia and hate on a daily basis. When I interviewed Heather Gay about her show Surviving Mormonism, which is definitely a video worth checking out, but we just talked about how the church for so many years was pushing conversion therapy, very similar to what I already addressed with the history of racism within the church. There's also this very long-standing history of very horrible and severe homophobia. They, for a while, were doing electroshock therapy as a form of conversion therapy at BYU. They had the gay witch hunts where they would send the cops to gay bars to scan the license plates to see if anyone at the gay bar was a BYU student. There's a great Wikipedia page all about this. I'm probably overdue I kind of talked about it in my video reacting to My Husband's Not Gay, but I've never done a deep dive on this topic, and it's probably long overdue. It's also just so frustrating to see how the church is so quick and willing to use minority-centric language to talk about being a religious minority, and how there's so much hate directed toward them and incorrect representations within the media. And I see them so quickly willing to say, hey, can you please respect us? Even though we're different than you, please respect us. Please accept who we are. And there's so much hypocrisy for me in asking for like a minority religious status and asking for respect and asking people to use the name that they want and saying, please respect us because of these things. But while asking for respect, they refuse to give it to gay people. They refuse to give women the priesthood. They refuse to take the verse in the Book of Mormon about black skin being a curse, still there to this day. And it's just so hypocritical to me to see them ask for respect that they're not willing to give. This is also the episode where we see Jen talking to a Dancing with the Stars pro named Ezra Sosa. He was also raised Mormon. I've talked a lot about how many members of Dancing with the Stars either used to be Mormon or are currently Mormon. In this clip, we'll also see Ezra address what it was like to be gay and grow up in the church.
Growing up here was so hard for me for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Is your family still part of the church?
Yeah, I mean, when they found out I was gay, they took me out of dance. I was literally locked me in a room. I think they automatically thought that I was dancing. That was the reason why I was gay. So when I turned 19, I left Utah, didn't talk to my mom, didn't talk to my dad. It took my mom a long time to realize how can my son not be accepted in a place that I love? And because of that, they all left the church. She's like, if my son's not accepted here, then I can't practice here.
And I thought that was so sad that, like, according to him, his parents literally thought the dance was turning him gay. And I think that's also just evidence of how much really just like misinformation there is about being gay, and how much homophobia really feeds into that misinformation and a total lack of comprehension about what it means for someone to be gay. I also think that this story of parents leaving the church after having a gay child, it's very positive for me. I'm glad that parents are willing to say, wow, like this is a really bad place for my child to be. I will not have my child grow up in this situation where all this messaging is telling them that they're sinful and evil and dirty. I just wish that that gut instinct that is, I'm glad that that's so common. I hear this story a lot, right? Story, gay man or woman comes out, the parents decide to leave. I'm really happy that that's the case. Sometimes the parents do just decide to disown the child. I have had an interview with Hiram, who is also a YouTuber. He's talked about just fully being disowned. But what I wish was more the gut instinct is that the whole community could rally around that idea. That it wasn't just the parents who are like, this is bad for my child, so we're leaving. I wish that everyone in that community could just say, this is bad for this child. And if the gospel of Jesus Christ is bad for children, we're all gonna be leaving. None of us will be a part of it. We won't do this half in, half out thing. We won't even try to change it from within. We'll just say, there's so much clear evidence this is damaging to children that we're just gonna be done with it. And I think for me, stepping back to look at just this graph again and how much the show has brought Mormonism into the public eye, I've had some people say that I should boycott the show, or that watching the show is condoning Mormonism or supporting Mormonism. I actually think that few pieces of media have criticized the church as well as this show. For me, at least, as a viewer myself who's seen all the show, all the seasons, I think this show has really opened the world's eyes, I think, to how much the church harms women, how much it harms Black people, how much it harms gay people. And I think the criticism here is so poignant that to just say I'm boycotting it is missing an opportunity to contend with just how many issues this show is revealing and criticizing. And I think it's just holding a great mirror to Mormon society and showing what's really going on beneath the surface. Here we are at the end of this video. Thank you if you've made it to the end. Sometimes in the past I've said like, I know not everyone makes it to the end, and then sometimes people will comment and be like, I saw the end. And I just feel like anyone who watches the whole analysis, I'm like, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for hearing my story, hearing what I have to say. I just really appreciate anyone who watches my content at all. I mean, keep in mind, like 2 years ago, I had never made a single video for social media, and now I still am very humbled and overwhelmed by the fact that people are listening. So thank you for being here at the end of the video. As I said, I do have a separate Patreon video. If you're just still like, I need more, I need more commentary. If you're still hanging on the edge of your seat, I do have a second video on Patreon. In this video, I covered my true thoughts about Whitney. I covered the conversation about when all the women come together in season 10. I talked about how Macy and Demi both are rude to Layla in different ways, because I feel like I had very strong feelings about that. Brett calling Miranda white trash, and Jordan getting relationship advice from Dakota. That's my checklist of everything I talked about. So it's already posted if you want to go check that out, if you want to keep the party going, as I said. If you haven't already seen my analysis from season 1 and season 2, I'll link that below as well. Thank you all so much for watching. I think the answer to the question if MomTok will survive this is definitely yes, because it's the #1 show. Every time they premiere the show and I look, it's always like #1. So I'm sure that Hulu is just enjoying the viewership on this one. So MomTok is definitely going to survive if Hulu has anything to say about it. But thank you all so much for watching. When season 4 comes out again, I promise I'll be here for you with lots to say, lots of notes. Thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you all next week.